Good morning. Welcome to our regular meeting of June 10th, 2019 of the Audit Committee. This is an independent committee of council, and with me here at the dais is Park Board Commissioner Chris Meyer. Myself, I'm the chair of this committee, Councilmember Lene Palmisano. I have with us Mr. Scott Neal, sorry. Councilmember Warsami is in a budget meeting in the mayor's office and will be here right afterwards, and Councilmember Schrader. We do have a quorum. I believe David Fisher will be here momentarily, but let's get started with our agenda. The agenda, colleagues, is before you. I will move first to adopt the agenda as you see in front of you today.
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. The second is here in your packets, but these are the minutes of our previous meeting, February 11th, 2019. May I have a motion to accept those minutes from last time?
So moved.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. The next item is a piece of unfinished business from last time. I made the mention, and we now have officially in all of the files and for the public a letter from Mayor Fry reappointing David Fisher to our audit committee for another term. So that audit committee appointment is something that we will need to receive and file. That's an appointment from the mayor's office for Mr. Fisher. So could I get a motion to receive and file this letter and continue forward?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries. Now we'll move to some of the reports. We have a great, robust audit meeting today, and I think we'll introduce our guests here in the room as we get to their own piece of business. So I'll ask Director Bigby to join us at the podium. Yep. And we'll start with the grant management audit report, if that works for you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, Chair Palmisano and audit committee members. We'll start with the grant management audit today. Grants are an important financial assistance tool used by government agencies and require a robust grant administration program to help provide centralized location for finding detailed information about funding opportunities, applications, forms, submission dates, grant awards, and grant policies. Strong controls help ensure grants are used for intended purposes in accordance with regulations. Sorry, I'll forward this. Okay. The graph here illustrates 3 different grant phases. The pre-award phase, which includes identifying grants and applying for grants. The grant award phase is acceptance of the grants. And the post-award phase can include management of grant resources and accounting and reporting. When we refer to grant administration, we're referring to the whole process, all 3 phases. The city's various department staff are ultimately responsible for grant management. However, we do have some centralized grant functions. Our intergovernmental relations support staff identify sources for grants and help departments in applying for grants and receiving council approval where needed and accepting grants. Our finance and property services staff helped support department level and citywide grant accounting and reporting needs, and they also conduct grant risk assessment and monitoring activities for all departments. Our audit objective was to determine whether controls are adequate to ensure grant compliance and efficient citywide grant management processes. The scope of this audit covered grant administration from January 1st, 2017 through February 28th, 2019. Our audit approach, sorry, let me turn this, is reviewing these objectives that we're going to go over in one moment, reporting in 2 phases. So all of the objectives on this page will be reported in this audit report with the exception of one phase, the CPED. City grant management policies and procedures were reviewed for adequacy, completeness, and communication of centralized grant management policies and procedures. We also reviewed centralized grant monitoring by reviewing the grant monitoring processes and ensuring risk of fraud and inappropriate use of funds is minimized. We took a sampling of department level grant management. A small department was selected, the lead hazard control and healthy homes within the health department, and the CPED was selected as the large department. In this report, we completed our small department review. However, the large department review will be completed probably September, October. That initiative will begin in August and will be reported in the phase 2. In these department reviews, we are reviewing the adequacy of program-level grant management controls. In this report, we also reviewed grant closeout and reporting processes by reviewing the accuracy and completeness of grant closeout and reporting. As a result of this audit, we identified 3 issues. Issue number 1, there is no single source grant management system to efficiently manage the city's grant-related activity throughout the grant's life cycle. Grant application data is manually gathered from grant review forms and monitoring of city council actions. Grant application data is manually tracked by intergovernmental relations grant staff and is shared with other departments as needed. Grant financial monitoring is performed by finance staff and requires several days on a monthly basis to manually compile grant-related subrecipient data. The city's financial system enables tracking of grant revenue and expense activity by fund and project number, but management is unable to report complete information on subrecipient data, which is required for federal grant reporting. Management action plan for this issue. Management agrees that a centralized grant administration approach has advantages. The Finance and Property Services Department will lead an effort to consolidate the grant website to provide grant recipients with one source for all grant-related information. This also remediates a low-risk issue that we'll discuss in a moment. Finance will schedule quarterly meetings to discuss further consolidation. And if consolidation is recommended and feasible, we'll develop a consolidation plan in coordination with the divisions and departments involved in the consolidation. So please recall at the moment, departments right now individually manage their own grant programs, with the exception of the intergovernmental relations and finance monitoring. At this time, management does not intend to perform a cost-benefit analysis for a separate grant management system. Issue number 2, grant risk assessment and monitoring prioritization processes do not completely cover all grants and subrecipients of grants. The central grant risk assessment and monitoring prioritization processes do not cover all grants and subrecipients. The risk assessment processes and subsequent monitoring of subrecipients require significant manual work from the finance grants management staff, and due to recent turnover, there are no dedicated staff to currently perform the grant management risk assessment and monitoring processes. At this time, the grant manager will perform these tasks on a limited basis until the FTE is filled. Management action plan for issue number 2. Management will continue to look for opportunities to automate heavily manual processes during ongoing process improvement initiatives, specifically payments subrecipients currently excluded during the risk assessment process will instead be moved to lower priority in the risk assessment, where 1 or 2 will be selected and added to the annual monitoring list. Management will review risk assessment and monitoring process checklists and make updates where necessary to ensure institutional knowledge and lessons learned have been incorporated. Management will fill a current FTE vacancy and plan to request funding in the 2020 budget to add 1 FTE to the finance grants teams. Issue number 3, the grants administration policies and procedures should be centralized, comprehensive, and communicated in a central location. So we found that there were adequate policies and procedures. However, they were not located in a central location to serve as one source information for various departments. Because this is a low-risk issue, it does not require a formal management action plan, but it should be noted that management is addressing this in the remediation of issue number 1. At this time, Deputy CFO Lori Johnson is here, as well as our Controller Lyle Hodges. Would you like to come up, Lori? Thank you.
Invite Lori Johnson. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Glad to be here, Chair Palmisano and committee members. Just a couple of highlights on the grant audit. And first of all, thanks for working with we appreciate working with the internal audit folks. We had a lot of conversations, also including in governmental relations. Matt Bauer is here representing that area. It is a kind of a scattered process, but so far that has worked. Maybe not ideal, but it certainly works. As you may know, our state auditors who audit the city each year also look at grants in depth, and through that process have not identified any issues related to grants. So although it is a little bit time consuming at times, we have been able to meet all of the requirements financially and the reporting requirements. And again, no issues have been identified. We certainly appreciate the support to look at a centralized monitoring and a grant system, and we will do that in coordination with the departments, including mainly intergovernmental relations, because they also do part of that. We also in finance have requested an additional FTE. Of course, that is competing with lots of other requests in the 2020 budget. But we do know that as the grant volume increases, as our number of subrecipients increase, and just the small grants as well, that we have more monitoring to do, and we have not had any increasing in staffing to do that. So we do appreciate the support and the guidance in exploring those opportunities, and we will continue to do that. But right now we do feel we have a very good handle on monitoring those grants through our controller's office and the individuals who work in the grant monitoring specifically. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions? Councilmember Schrader.
So I know, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the questions is, and I know I was looking at software to go to that. I mean, as you're hiring more people, I mean, how is that being balanced? You know, is it something that the person coming in that would also be looking at whether software could handle that position?
Yes, Councilmember Palmisano, Chair Schroeder, or Councilmember Schroeder. We would be looking at the system. However, the cost benefit probably would not point us to that direction, simply because it would be so expensive to consolidate that along with our financial system. So what we'd like to do instead is look at how we can make our financial system a little bit more robust in that area, including our procurement system. We do have some methods in there to track subrecipients. However, it's kind of an on your honor type of system. So we have explored that. The new system itself, we'll take a look at it, but we don't think the return on investment will be there.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure if this is a question for you or Director Bigby, Ms. Johnson, but I'm curious, in the very beginning of this, it was explained how the grant process actually even includes what grants we choose to seek, right? And what grants we write or RFP for or submit a proposal for. Could you help us understand, are there any recommendations of that? Or maybe first I'd like to understand from the finance department, does finance know if or when another department chooses to go out and write a grant or apply for a grant for something? Whether, I assume they know if we're going to give out a grant. I guess that's not what I'm talking about, because that would be part of the budget process. But when we seek grants, do you get notified of that, or only if or when it is awarded to the
Yes.
city?
Chair Palmisano, we do not get notified in advance. That is generally up to the departments and the council if there's matching or requirements related to council approval. We pick them up as we review council minutes and council activity. We are not on the front end of determining whether or not a department or a division should apply for a grant. At times that could be beneficial, I imagine, but generally the departments are much more aware of their needs and whether that grant will meet their needs, and whether, if there is a city match requirement, that we can maintain that match. So we are not involved in that process.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I don't
Thank
see any
you.
other questions. Thank you for being here. I will move to first receive and file the grant management audit report, and then direct staff to publish that report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
That motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Next, we have the 311 and Public Works consultation report, and we have Director Bigby to report on that.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members. Internal Auditor Travis Com will step up and present this consultation. Travis?
Thank you.
Oh.
Welcome.
Thanks. Chair Palmisano, members of the committee, today we're going to talk about 301 Public Works sidewalk, snow, and ice removal consultation. Just kind of going with a brief overview and then kind of summary of the observations and recommendations that we observed. As there was a consultation, management action plans and responses were not required, but we did kind of, they are contained in the report itself. So just some background. So Minneapolis ordinance requires property owners to clear and treat sidewalks after snowfall within a defined time frame, 24 hours for single-family homes and 4 daytime hours for other properties. To do that, the city relies on a complaint-based reporting system, with 311 handling the complaint intake, and the Public Works handling the inspections and billing and assessment and the cost for the cost to clear the sidewalks. As sidewalks found in violation after a visual inspection, subject to clearing and billing by the city to help cover those clearing costs. So just kind of, so Minneapolis 311 currently receives sidewalk, snow, and ice complaints in the following ways. One way is people can call 311 and speak with an agent, and the ad gets logged. People can also submit a complaint online through the self-service platform, or they can also use a mobile application. And something that was piloted this year, there's a new pilot program where city inspectors through the proactive sidewalk inspection project will go out and kind of log those complaints as well. And just kind of on this table one, just kind of overview of the complaints and the methods that they're coming in. So you can kind of see that inspector pilot has been popular this past year. So kind of the objective of this was to review data collection and reporting of information and complaints related to sidewalk, snow, and ice removal to identify potential process improvements within the system. There's a very targeted scope with a review of 311 Public Works and ALMS data intake processing controls, including data quality related to accuracy of complaint data made of 311 and imported in ALMS, effectiveness of technology used for the intake of complaints, and then the quality of complaint data flowing through the following processes: communication of violation to residents, inspecting processes of residents in violation, and then the billing for work completed.
Mr. Kim, before you go on, could you help me understand why we chose to do this audit, how it came up with, in collaboration with, or why we brought it up to Public Works? I know personally, and I think that my colleagues here did receive a variety of complaints about the complaints. But can you tell me kind of what made this bubble up to the surface as an item that we'd want to do a consult on?
Yeah, I'm going to refer to Dr. Bigby to more specifics.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members. Yes, during our risk assessment discussions, we heard from City Council and we heard from Public Works and 311 that we were getting numerous complaints on sidewalk, snow, and ice removal. So we agreed to do a consultation with 311 and Public Works to gather and analyze the data. And in our initial planning discussions, we could see that the biggest problem seemed to be with the aggregation of the data and the intake process. And the review was to determine why there are still so many complaints. even given that there were process improvements that Public Works had been initiating. So the result was this consultation.
So then just to fully understand, the complaint was about the letter they received, or the complaint was that after we thought we sent somebody out to an address to remediate it, we were still getting complaints about the original complaint?
I would say it included all of that. We weren't sure where the complaints were what they were referring to specifically until we began to analyze the data.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So just kind of there. So with there, 4 opportunities for process improvement were noted and presented to management. Just kind of a brief summary. The first one, the property info database and taxpayer property information outdated, not aligned, and can populate inaccurate address information into the code enforcement cases. So these are the 2 systems that are used in the process itself that are not aligned. So the recommendation is property info and taxpayer information should be updated regularly and aligned with the Minneapolis address data records to further increase the integrity of the data and improve efficiencies. And just kind of note, this requires citywide cross-function management discussions, as Public Works and 311 are not the primary database managers of this process. The second one is the notice of violation is sent to the property address owner that is the subject of the snow and ice complaint prior to performing a visual inspection of the property to determine if the complaint is accurate. So this relates to the letter that residents receive after the report is made. It's sent out by Public Works through the process. I'm just kind of notifying them that there has been a violation. So the recommendation is that it should be issued after visual inspection is performed to validate the existence and accuracy of the violation. Photographs should be taken by city inspectors and retained in the code enforcement case file. And we also like to note that during the 2018-2019 winter season, Public Works did implement a more proactive inspection as part of the pilot program. And then just kind of some analysis through here. So just kind of we kind of looked at where the complaints, or the overall complaints and the invalid complaint intake. So a lot of the over the past couple of years, the over or invalid rate has increased, and a lot of it has been through the mobile application. In Table 2, and then Table 3 here, kind of similarly, the mobile application has a lot. There's more duplicate complaints that are submitted through there as well, and the overall duplication rate has increased over the past couple of years through here. Just looking at the past 2017 through March 2019 data. Going along there, recommendation number 3 is a mobile, or observation number 3, the mobile 311 application is used the least when compared to other platforms, while generating the most inaccurate sidewalk, snow, and ice removal complaints. So in conjunction with those past couple of things, kind of looking at overall usage of the platforms and where the complaints came in, and the mobile application was kind of used the least in the past couple of years, while generating the most complaints. And we also like to note that the Inspector Pod has led to, or been a part of a significant number of the overall complaints that are submitted to this. So with the recommendation, the recommendation is the mobile 311 application should be suspended until the application enhancements can further increase the location accuracy of a snow and ice complaint. A cost-benefit analysis should be performed to determine if an upgrade of the mobile 311 application should be performed, or if the mobile platform should be discontinued. We would like to know that smartphone technology is expected to increase in the future, and if an upgrade is determined to be feasible, the application should require more than one data element and be synchronized with the Minneapolis addressing system to ensure address input is accurate from the end user.
Mr. Kim, could you go back a couple of slides? Are you saying that you think we should shut off the 311 mobile app because the inaccuracy of it was one more table? Because the inaccuracy of it was 2%? So the recommendation is that a lot of the complaints and errors are submitted through the application, and based on our observations through the application right now, there's just the one data element that is required when submitting a complaint. So the recommendation kind of is more towards looking for improvements within the application and trying to make it more robust and aligned so that those complaints don't occur. Okay, wait, so I apologize. It looks like through the mobile application, it was closer to 6%. Okay, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure I understand what this chart is trying to convey to me. In 2019, it's saying that 96% of the complaints were valid. Is that right? Am I reading the inverse of that? Is that true?
Chair Palmisano was
Table two.
Commissioner Neal, which table?
Table 2?
Table 2? Yeah, correct.
Okay. So 96 and some percent were valid and 3.15 were invalid.
Correct.
Or-
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay.
And then the last opportunity for process improvement, 311 staff should validate the address of a sidewalk snow and ice complaint in accordance with the enterprise addresses system. However, 311 staff are not validating that service request complaints in 311 match the case address complaint and that are submitted. So the recommendation is all 311 staff that manage snow and ice complaints should be granted read-only access to and should monitor and validate the service request address in 311 the same as the code enforcement case address and by validating the service complaint address, or by validating that the service complaint address matches the populated address and 311 can ensure that the correct address is being selected for possible violations.
Mr. Kemp, can you help us understand what that means, that recommendation? You're saying that 311 staff should make sure, I'm not really sure. Can you help me understand what that recommendation is, just in plain
Yeah.
language terms?
Chair Palmisano, Director Bigby can answer that.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, one way to reduce errors is to validate the address as the complaint interfaces with the Public Works system. And we have Diane Nelson from 311 here. Diane, would you be able to help comment on this part of the phase? Thank you.
Hi, Chair Palmisano and Council Committee members. When we talk about address validation, 311 is currently using SeeClickFix as the mobile application. This is a third-party vendor. SeeClickFix uses its own GPS technology, and so when an end user is out reporting an issue and they identify their location, they're not always validating that they're in front of the correct location. They might be walking, they might be reporting it after the fact, and so there is no address validation like there is with an agent, where we're asking additional questions to make sure the correct address is being inputted. Also, the GPS application that SeeClickFix uses is not synchronized with the City of Minneapolis address parcel system. So the user may be pinging a location and that address might not necessarily match what we have in our city addressing system. And so sometimes there's address conflicts, in those cases, they might be reporting the wrong address to Public Works.
Through SeeClickFix.
Through SeeClickFix. There is a smaller percentage of inaccuracies when going through the mobile app, because again, we're relying on the user to make sure they're entering the information correctly, making sure they're in front of the right location, and then also because the GPS technology in SeeClickFix does not consistently match with our city addressing system.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, I also wanted to add 311 staff didn't have full visibility into the ELM system, which is yet a different system that Public Works uses. So during this audit, Public Works granted read-only access to all of 311 staff that work on this type of complaint management, where before only a higher level supervisor could log in and see the address information related to a complaint that had already been submitted. Are there any other questions on this review?
Well, if you're done, then yes.
Okay, sorry. Yes, that was it.
Sorry, Mr. Neal.
Thank you. One question I had was, through this consultation, were you able to determine the effectiveness of the initial letter or the initial notification? Is there data that's kept from after someone receives the letter to a visual inspection that says, yep, they took care of the issue? Is there anything like that so we could know whether how effective each step is in the process?
That's a good question. Diane, do you know the answer to that? I'll have to get back to you.
The other question I had, Madam Chair, maybe more for the city attorney, and that is, we don't have to have a similar sort of pre-notification in order to tow a vehicle on a street after a declaration of a snow emergency. Is there a different statutory basis for sidewalks where there has to be that kind of notification, or could you do something similar in that regard?
Chair Palmisano, members of the committee, I am not a person who has worked in any of the regulatory areas, but I believe that our ordinance calls out for this process. So I could ask that the regulatory services attorney look into that and get back to you with an answer.
Yeah, I'd like for us to have that answer back. You know, a couple of considerations was about how our ability to enforce the sidewalk ordinance is so very dependent on the U.S. Postal Service and the time it takes to send out mail and allow for remediation and then to go and do the remediation work. One of the changes that we recently made was that after they've been given that notification once and it's needed to be remediated by a contractor, then subsequent violations can just be remediated by that contractor without additional notice. So that was one way that we tried to shrink that window. There's a lot of things that happen in remediating a snow or ice complaint, that being other snowfall will restart the timeline for that again. So it is a challenge to manage snow and ice complaints. I really appreciate Mr. Neal's question about how do we have to give notice? Could we change the ordinance and not give notice and make this more like a vehicle that would get towed? I'm curious, there seems to be no enterprise approach to managing our GIS. Could you, through this process, Director Bigby, while you didn't look at them in depth, what are other departments doing to make or maintain their GIS to be more accurate? I appreciate that Public Works probably has the most GIS heavy work in terms of reports of complaints, whether it's potholes or sidewalks or other kinds of issues in our right-of-way. But other departments that are reliant on GIS, have you seen anything positive as to how we help to get to the right place?
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, we haven't performed any work in that area yet. However, we have received numerous complaints about various processes that utilize GIS information. So this is actually on our audit plan for 2020. In the meantime, we're asking Public Works and 311 to get a cross-functional management team conversation going about the need to coordinate GIS information in the city.
Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I just wanted to kind of follow up on Commissioner Neal's comment. I think and appreciate all the work you've been doing, Director, because this is not as simple as we better just enforce it. Because in my area, it's how we notice and how we work this out is definitely needed, and at the same time, it is complex when you factor in seniors as well as school breaks and the unpredictability of the snow and ice fall. So I think it helps to know what our options are, but I would encourage us to have a more nuanced approach, especially as we get down to the individual block by block level.
In the meantime, Director Bigby, this seems like in the error rate, which has some significance, that part of this would be a costly mess. Is it fair to say that we'd be sending notices of violations to the wrong addresses and not sending them to the correct addresses?
I think that's true, Chair Palmisano and audit committee members, and probably contributes to an increased number of complaints. Meanwhile, Public Works has implemented proactive inspections, which seems to be having a positive impact. So hopefully over time that will reduce the number of complaints received in the first place. There are several things I think that can impact having correct information so that the notice of violation goes to the right address to begin with.
Chair Bigby, if we don't invest in fixing this, is it fair to say it's going to get worse? Or will it just stay the same kind of point in time look that you've done?
I think it's fair to say that it won't get better without taking some proactive measures. And we encourage data-driven decision-making, so being able to obtain and analyze the data and monitoring the efforts that you make to see if they really do have the desired effect that was intended.
Would regulatory services be using the same system? My understanding is a lot of 311 complaints would get regulatory services dispatched for different reasons. Would they have the same difficulty in locating things and the same error rate? Yeah, I'm seeing Diane nod her head yes. What considerations would be involved in upgrading the mobile app? I'm not sure if that's a question for you, Director Bigby, or you, Ms. Nelson.
I'd like to call up Diane Nelson to answer that question.
Ms. Nelson.
Chair Palmisano and committee members, it would be a significant and costly effort. We have spoken to our vendor and partner, SeeClickFix, a number of times about some inconsistencies or challenges that we are having with the mobile app. We are currently planning to have another conversation with them. Their contract is going to be up within the year, so our director is going to be exploring other options. We recognize this to be an issue. The public likes to use the mobile app. They like to self-report. Self-service is really important, but we also want to maintain the integrity of the data and make sure we're sending, reliable information to the other city departments. So it's something that we are currently exploring. I don't have an answer for you today. This audit has been helpful in bringing certain things to light, and now that we know about it, we're going to work to address it. I just don't know what that looks like yet. Questions?
Ms. Nelson, will you, or do you think it's perhaps the purview of a different department, lead a cross-functional work group to talk about geographic information data quality and how it's used between GIS and the city? Or do you think that in this instance it's more up to Public Works?
I've been involved in those conversations in the past. We have had those conversations off and on for the past 5 years with Public Works. I had worked with Scott Wellen. I would be one of the members on that team that has those discussions. I would, of course, involve our director, Trish Glover, but the GIS across the city has been a little bit of a pain point for 311 when identifying, basically anything where issues are, where hooded meters are, potholes, just a number of things. And so we do plan to engage Public Works and possibly IT in those conversations again.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that information. Thank you for engaging in this audit and looking at this thoroughly. It's a hot button issue. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? With that, I'll move to receive and file this report and direct staff to publish the report. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Kam, for your work. Director Bigby, now we have another audit about police equity and recruiting. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, we completed an equity in recruiting consultation collaborating with the Police Department, Civil Rights Office of Police Conduct Review, IT Analytics Hub, and Human Resources. This audit came up because Police Department and Human Resources noted that in some phases of the recruiting process, it appeared to be that either certain genders or certain races were not moving forward to the next step at the same rate that they were entering the step. So we decided to obtain data, analyze data, and see what the data is really showing us. If we identified problems, then we would determine what to do next. So when we started the consultation, we obtained data over related to the recruiting of 3 types of police officers. The community service officer is a civilian position with the possibility of promotion to full-time police officer position. The cadet is a hired position that is promoted to police officer upon successful completion of the Minneapolis post-board academic and skills requirements that are part of the Recruit Academy. And then sworn recruits are assigned to areas detecting, preventing, and investigating crimes, maintaining law and order, and making arrests and protecting life and property. The scope of this review included data from 2015 through the end of 2018, which covered 11 recruiting classes for these 3 positions. The diagram here illustrates the areas that this report covers in phase 1, which is from the initial application through the fitness exam, through subject matter expert review, then through the police background. What will be covered in phase 2 later this year will pick up with the medical review, going to the police academy, job placement in the police department, and then separation from the city police department. Our audit approach was to look at police recruiting data for all steps and enter them electronically. So to start with, a lot of data was just on forms, some of it was handwritten. So it was a huge lift initially to get this data entered electronically. We then passed the data to the IT Analytics Hub, where the data was aggregated, and IT Analytics Hub created management dashboards so that we could analyze the data for each step in the recruiting process. In the Analytics Hub, the data is aggregated, so you can't see personal information. It's aggregated by gender and race, so you can drill down on those 2 demographics. Cross-functional management stakeholder groups were then brought together to prioritize 4 potential problems that we identified in our initial look at the data. The cross-functional work groups were then assigned to dive into each of their problems, analyze the problem further, obtain additional information, attempt to identify root cause of the problem, and come up with some proposed solutions that would satisfy all stakeholder groups. The 4 work groups were formed for these 4 problems that we identified in the initial look at the data. General police hiring processes, so from beginning to end of the process, there were some overall process improvements that could be made. And it generally involved voluntarily departing from the hiring process, and we wanted to know why that was happening. The fitness test assessment process, we wanted to improve the fitness portion to increase equitable and consistent administration of the exam. Subject matter expert review, improving the subject matter expert review process based on defined requirements. And the 4th was the background investigation process, improving the background process to ensure equitable and consistent decision making. Now we'll take a deeper look at each one of those steps. General police hiring processes. The data analysis showed us that the work group reviewed and analyzed the data related to the hiring process overall, including analyzing why applicants are leaving the hiring process voluntarily. From looking at the data, 3 process improvements were suggested. Consider a cross-functional team to develop and administer a follow-up survey regarding applicants voluntarily departing the hiring process. Use these results to inform process improvements. I'd like to note that this was actually done during our consultation. We didn't know why people weren't showing up for the fitness exam and why they were not showing up for other parts of the hiring process. So 700 applicants were surveyed, and we were able to analyze some of the answers received. Some applicants indicated that the hiring process takes too long. By the time that we got back to them for the next step, they had already taken other jobs. Management is to consider a deeper dive into the hiring process timeline. How long is each step and what can be done to reduce the duration both overall and between steps? Consider evaluating the combination of application steps to minimize trips for out-of-town applicants. So these are our process improvements we're suggesting, and it will take MPD and HR to work together to implement these changes. We also suggested consider actively reaching out to applicants, example through phone calls, before steps that need applicant interaction, such as the fitness exam, to ensure that applicants are aware of their dates, times, and location choices. So we heard from some applicants that they couldn't come to a fitness exam, for example, at the time it was offered. Well, in some cases, there was a second opportunity to come to the fitness exam, and the applicant wasn't aware that there was another choice. The second is the fitness test assessment process. Over the 11 exams analyzed during the 4-year period, women were failing the fitness test assessment at higher rates than men. Of the 6 most recent exams, women dropped at a higher rate than men. For example, if you look in the table below, you'll see in the third line for recruit exam 2018-00137, you had 12% female entering the fitness exam and 4% female passing the fitness. Of the people who passed the exam, only 4% were female. So for the 6 tests listed in this chart, where I have gender off to the right, that's where we expected women to be passing at a higher rate than they actually passed.
Director Bigby, but per your last slide, what you're saying is they didn't pass because they didn't show up?
We wanted to analyze why they were not passing at a higher rate. There were a number of contributing factors. One key factor was that women at a very high rate did not even show up for the fitness exam. So that significantly impacted the pass rates. We also noticed that some types of tests in the fitness test seemed to cause some problems based on gender. So we didn't spend too much time on that because MPD and HR have a project underway to revise their fitness exam. They've hired a consultant. They're looking at best practices to change the tests that are administered for the fitness test. And it includes an assessment of what is required to perform current duties. Some other suggestions that came out of this analysis of the fitness test exam were to select and implement improved fitness test, which is underway, survey applicants to continue identifying potential problems, automate data collection to facilitate reporting and monitoring that supports ongoing process improvements, shorten the length of the selection process. As we mentioned, many candidates are taking other jobs before they can complete the recruiting process. Offer more flexibility in scheduling the fitness test to be as inclusive as possible. Communication and community outreach. Once the new fitness test is implemented, improve communication to ensure that potential applicants have a better understanding of the nature and difficulty of the fitness requirements, and consider offering training targeted to female candidates.
We have a question or comment from Mr. Neal.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Director Bigby, could we go back one slide? Okay, it seems to me that there's 2 different kinds of failure that we're talking about here. There's the people that fail to show up to take the test, and then there's the people that take the test and fail it. right?
Correct.
Are both of those classes of failure, are they both shown in
Yes.
these numbers, so they're not disaggregated in this chart?
No.
Okay.
And one reason why we didn't spend more time on each specific test failure,
Yeah.
the most significant contributing factor was not showing up for the test. Also, there was a change in how the fitness test was administered in 2018 because anecdotally management was noticing these problems. They changed the fitness test to a fitness assessment where everyone who tried and completed the test would pass. So that was a temporary workaround, and it will continue until the new fitness test is implemented. So it had already been taken care of.
So for the female candidates that do show up and who do take the test, their failure rate is very low then, right?
Beginning in the last two classes of 2018.
Okay.
So basically the
Is it
test.
zero? Is it?
Right,
zero?
if they completed the test. So that it wasn't really serving as a fitness test. So it required getting the data and analyzing data to determine why these problems were occurring so that you actually make decisions to correct the right things.
Right. Okay.
So I think that the new fitness test will serve that purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Bigby, something that you mentioned here in proposed process improvements is to shorten the length of the selection process. How long is that selection process today? How long does it typically take?
I'm going to ask Stacy Blaskowski that question. I think it can be upwards of several months, 6 months? Okay. Several months, and the background check probably takes the longest.
And so what we're measuring here is from their point of contact to indicate their interest in a recruiting class to the point that they are hired and they're a probationary peace officer, or before they begin their training, their formal training with Minneapolis PD.
Right, Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, we think that there are efficiencies that can be gained over the entire process, from the time of the application through this phase 1 review, which goes through the background check. We think there are opportunities to speed up the hiring process, but the background check most significantly contributes to the length of the hiring process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. A third potential problem the data was showing us was subject matter expert review. Requirements for selection are not defined in the subject matter expert review phase and are not consistently applied. Women and people of color appear to pass at a higher rate in this phase than other stages in the hiring process. So it was still unexpected. When we reviewed the data, we saw that women and people of color were passing at a higher rate, and we wanted to know why. So the work group dove into the data and came up with some proposed process improvements to identify best practices and document goals for the subject matter expert review evaluation, because at this time nothing was documented. Establish written standards for those serving as subject matter experts. Sometimes subject matter experts were simply selecting a specified number of candidates due to how many can be hired. The recommendation is to establish written criteria for evaluating the candidates so that it can be consistently applied in every subject matter expert review. Establish an equitable set of criteria that allows a subject matter expert to objectively rank the candidates. So once you select the candidates, if you only have a few positions, how do you rank those candidates? And document your process. Establish formal change management processes to avoid midstream changes. We found that this was a theme across several recruiting processes, a lack of formal change management. So what can be changed, which stakeholder groups should weigh in on that change, who has the authority to approve the change, and then how is the change implemented so it's consistently applied every time. Are there any questions on subject matter expert review?
Director Bigby, when you
Yes.
say avoid midstream changes, do you mean so that we recruit subsequent recruiting classes or hiring classes in the same way that we did the time before, or do you mean somewhere along the way of a selection process we change the criteria on a candidate?
Well, none of it was documented, so we don't know what criteria was used. It was all informal.
I see.
So if between one group and another, if there were fewer people available to do the subject matter expert review, that could change the process. What was discussed, how many were selected, how they were ranked, that could change with each class because there was no documented process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The last step in this Phase 1 report is the background review. The work group identified multiple steps within this background phase of the recruiting process, which includes a preliminary screening for minimum requirements, a secondary screening after a background check is initially run for criminal offenses or other concerns that automatically bar a candidate's eligibility, and then screening candidates, excluding demographic data, and their anonymous summary background reports at a roundtable review. The candidate is not present for the background review process. Over the 11 exams analyzed, Black, Indigenous, or people of color candidates appear to fall out of the police hiring process stage at a higher rate when compared to their white peers. By analyzing the data, the work group came up with these 3 proposed solutions. Number 1, delineate the data for each step of the background investigations phase, including preliminary review for minimum qualifications, post-requirement review for background elements that may violate post-requirements, roundtable 1 for elimination based on concerning elements in background that do not cause automatic elimination, then roundtable 2 for assessing and eliminating because of the number of available positions. So this is a proposed more formal structure around the background processes. Number 2, create guidelines for elimination at the roundtable stage to evaluate concerns in a background check that do not require automatic elimination. So similar to the subject matter expert review, this is a roundtable discussion, and we're looking for formal criteria and documentation so that it's consistently applied each time. Number 3, create guidelines for elimination at the roundtable stage based on the number of positions available. This would likely be an assessment scoring process based on objective criteria. Are there any questions on the background review stage?
Councilmember Schrader?
Sure, Director Bixby, it seems to be that you're breaking down, like this and even earlier on, breaking down the data a little bit more. Is it correct to assume that you just aren't able to come up with any top line reasons that people are being knocked out besides the length of time?
Some of that data is available for specific reasons, but it's shared in the dashboard at an aggregated level to protect people's personal information. So like the reason why someone might fail a background check was not included here, the exact reasons, but the data is available if police and HR need to dive into that.
I guess more what I'm asking is the data might be there, but it's not, I'm asking if there's specific things it's pointing to, or is it, I mean, with 11, I'm sure it's very hard to get here's the reason why. But if the data's there and it seems that you're trying to separate it out a little bit more, it seems that there's not a specific reason, that it almost seems like almost a case by case, or I'm trying to draw some conclusions from
I got
the
you. Chair Palmisano, audit committee members, we're looking at controls over the overall process. So if we can't determine why certain people are dropping out specifically, we may or may not have the data on that. We look at controls that would help manage the process so that you would know going forward. And that's how we came up with our proposed solutions. And we also have another set of overall recommendations. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Thank you. So our last slide is our overall process recommendations. We noticed that there were some control weaknesses or control gaps for one or more phases in the police recruiting process. So we summarize those into these 5 takeaways. Communication and consensus. We need cross-functional participation in process improvement initiatives. So sometimes that was happening, sometimes it wasn't. We would like IT, police, HR to work together, form work groups, pull in other stakeholders as needed to get consensus on changes in the recruiting process. Ensure that criteria for each phase in the recruiting process are clearly established, are documented, and consistently applied. Ensure that these phases are documented, the criteria is documented, and results are documented. Implement formal change management, which means that cross-functional teams agree on the changes to be made. It's determined who approves those changes, and then changes are implemented and consistently applied. And then finally, monitoring to support continuous process improvement. Automate the data collection process so that the dashboard can continue to be consumed by management, which would leverage and drive data-driven decision making. And then identify and monitor performance metrics through the dashboard. And I'd like to take a moment to call up our IT Analytics Hub data scientist, Stacy Blaskowski, who actually built the dashboard for management in this project. Stacy?
Ms. Blaskowski, thank you for joining us.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, thanks for letting me be here. I'm going to take a few minutes and explain what we did for this audit study, the work groups that we created, how we used the data to get what we needed, and then the steps moving forward to make this be more automated. So what we had is we created a dashboard that showed the process steps, so each step that we had data for, how it went through for each gender, and the race breakdowns, also the reasons for why they exited the hiring process. It showed fallout types based by class, based by the 3 different groups, the CSO, the cadet, and the recruits. We also showed demographic comparisons, the exam step differences, and then a fitness test summary. In doing this, when we got the data from the system that we use, it gives us an output of basically the last step that each candidate was in. In doing that, we then have to connect it to the demographic data and work backwards and say if this was their last step, then they were also in all the preceding steps. By doing that, we could say these were the people that were in each step where they fell out and some of the reason codes for why they fell out of the process. For the fitness exam, all that data is recorded on paper. We had a lot of help from HR in transcribing that into electronic format so that we could analyze basically who fell out of the fitness tests and where. And in going forward, as Director Bigsby has pointed out, documentation of the process and adding more steps to be able to say what happens where will help us be able to get clearer inputs into what's happening in this process, along with making the fitness exam more electronic so that nobody has to transcribe it in the future.
Ms. Blaskowski, how much of this was automated prior to your involvement in this audit?
We can pull the last step out for recruits, but that was about it.
So it wasn't automated,
It wasn't
was just
automated.
a system lookup where you could see what
Correct.
stage they were in, but
Yes.
there was nothing automated about this process.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Director Bigby, I appreciate that automation and process improvement here is going to play a role. Another part of a hiring process, especially with our MPD, is about a psychological screening. Can you tell me a little bit about how that plays into your work here in equity and recruiting? I believe it's probably as you embark on phase 2.
Yes. Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, we haven't analyzed any data in that review. We're calling it the medical review, which will be the phase where we start for phase 2 to start later this fall. So we'll gather the data of applicants entering that phase of the recruiting process, analyze who's coming out of that process as pass or fail, and understand the controls that are in place, the criteria that are used, ensuring criteria is not biased and is consistently applied.
Thank you. I really appreciate that we had Ms. Bleskowski and the data analytics team help with this audit. Seems like you did a lot of cleanup work here. How do we ensure that this dashboard is refreshed in the future? It seems like that's HR's to do.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, I spoke with Ms. Bleskowski. It still requires automation of recruiting processes. HR is going to prioritize automation with many other initiatives that they have underway, but the police department and HR management can continue working on, at a minimum, converting data intake into electronic form, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or some other application, and then automating after that where possible. I think the worst case scenario is having a manual form with handwritten notes on it that has to be manually re-entered again. That introduces error and is very time consuming.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments from the audit committee? I don't see any. Does this complete that piece of it? All right, then I will move to receive and file the Equity and Police Recruiting Data Consult Phase 1 report. We are eager for Phase 2 and direct staff to publish this report.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. I'd also like, as we go into our audit planning work, if you wanted to, Director Bigby, spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the work that has been, or some of the scoping that has been done of police off-duty work. I would then, after that, seek my colleagues' approval on an amendment to add police off-duty work audits to our plan for this year. Director Bigby, did you want to share a little bit about that? Thanks.
Sure. Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, we considered police overtime and police off-duty work to analyze based on requests from management, city council, and the audit committee. We decided to focus this review on off-duty work specifically. We will analyze off-duty work policies and procedures and gather and analyze data to, and then compare and benchmark to what other city police departments are doing. And then get a better idea if we think adequate controls are in place or if we suggest some control improvements to minimize the risk to public safety.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Bigby, in reading the material before the meeting, I became somewhat confused on exactly what off-duty work is. Is this independent of regular duty officers in plain clothes, or are they in uniform and off-duty work? What definitions are we dealing with here?
For off-duty work, we're looking at off-duty where an officer will wear a uniform and log into 911 when they're performing their off-duty work. So if it's not related to police work, then we would not have the data for this particular review. Thank you.
Councilmember Warsame.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that question. So this means like when you see officers in Wells Fargo or in gas stations, they still wear the uniform. They have the beat car outside, but they're getting paid by the business that they're serving. Is that?
Yes, Chair Palmisano, Committee Member Warsame, that's exactly right. They're not getting paid by the city, but getting paid by another company to perform the off-duty work. If the city is paying the officer for work in addition to the regular schedule, that would be considered overtime.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Ms. Bigby, a follow-up question to that then. When the police were put on duty during, say, the Super Bowl or super big events that we have, is that overtime or is that off-duty work?
That would be overtime. Thank you. Although I'd like to add, I'm sure there was additional off-duty work with the local companies having thousands and thousands of visitors in the city. We'll see that in the data as well. We know when certain events come to town, so we should see the data increase for off-duty work and overtime if we were analyzing overtime as it coincides with certain events that are happening in the city. So we take that into consideration.
Other questions or comments? All right, with that, I'd like I seek your approval on amending the 2019 risk-based integrated audit plan by adding this police off-duty work audit. I will move that. Is there a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you for beginning your work in that.
Thank you.
Next, we have a report of the internal auditor. Go ahead.
We'll start with audit work in progress. We currently have 3 projects in progress: the Park Board Enterprise Risk Management Consultation, the Contract Amendments Audit, and the IT Analytics Hub General Controls Consultation. For the Park Board Enterprise Risk Assessment Consultation, we will be performing a training and review with 8 management members who will then be performing the enterprise risk assessments throughout the Park Board. Internal Audit will partner with them at least through the first 2 pilots. So we are kicking that off this month in June. The Contract Amendments Audit is a review of all contract changes for a period of 4 years. We're looking for unusual trends, and then we'll analyze contracts to ensure conformance with policy and to look for fraud red flags. The IT Analytics Hub General Consultation, IT General Controls Consultation, is to review governance, design, and effectiveness of IT Data Analytics Hub, security, and IT general controls for adequate safeguards around their data aggregation and reporting processes. We'd like to note that the IT Analytics Hub is up and running, but they're still building out and developing. So we thought this would be a great time to come in and consult with them on the review of their security controls. We are also performing continuous monitoring, which is assessing risk on a more frequent basis and typically includes meetings with management to determine where they're at in certain processes that they were designing or implementing. So NCR, we're still following up with them on their finance policies and oversight of neighborhood spending of city reimbursed funds. Data management, governance, and privacy encompasses a lot of areas and governance committees. They often invite internal audit to participate and discuss risks as they are analyzing processes or building out their committees. Most recently, privacy. We monitor and provide risk management feedback on risk management activities. Internal controls specifically is a finance function that's building out to monitor and test controls over financial reporting, and audit interacts with them quarterly at least, and we are often invited to provide feedback on assessing risk for controls that they are monitoring. We also have the ongoing special project enterprise complaint management. There was a 2015 consultation with some recommendations. Some of those recommendations are still in process. In addition, internal audit is a key stakeholder now in the enterprise complaint management process. We sit on the triage team. Sometimes we participate or lead investigations. And most importantly, when there is a fraud event, we follow up to ensure that internal controls are either implemented or are strengthened so that that same fraud would not happen again, or to minimize the risk that it would not happen again. IT and cybersecurity audit planning. We have scheduled in June a detailed discussion with IT and cybersecurity teams to assess risk and determine what would be a best way for internal audit to work in that space in the coming 12 to 18 months. And with that, I would like to introduce our Deputy Chief Information Officer, Beth Cousins, who is going to introduce the new Chief Information Security Officer for the city.
Thank you. I don't see Beth Cousins here, but I do invite up our new.
I'm sorry, Beth had to step out. I would like to introduce Dia Abu Shakra, our new Chief Information Security Officer.
Mr. Abu Shakra, welcome.
Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members, thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. It's definitely a pleasure and honor being here and leading information security for the city. I come to you in the city from a 20-plus year career in IT and security, dedicated. It's not just what I do, it's my passion. I'm a technologist at heart. I studied here in the United States, 3 college degrees, working on my 4th PhD, hopefully next year. I have over a dozen industry certifications, including one in ethical hacking and penetration testing, which opened up my eyes wide open about what the adversaries can do and, unfortunately, the kind of damage they can inflict on our systems. As I hear all the audit issues, there's always a technology piece, a data piece involved. And the threat landscape is changing constantly. And with that, we have to be vigilant. We have to ensure that our controls are adequate to detect, prevent, and hopefully deter our adversaries from inflicting harm on us. There's not a day that you hear in the news that goes by without hearing somebody getting hacked, somebody getting compromised. My role is going to be to help the city avoid that as much as possible. And I'm going to lean and ask for all your help and support to do that, building on all the work that's been done and working with all of our partners across the city to help establish a program and a framework that not only addresses the current needs, but also sets us up to handle the future cybersecurity needs. So with that.
Thank you. Any comments from my colleagues? I will share that you have big shoes to fill, Mr. Abu Shakra. Over the past couple of years, our audit committee has helped our city embark on a business impact analysis. And we all are aware that the threat landscape for local municipalities is great in a changing environment. So we welcome your oversight to it.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abu Shakra. I would like to call up Internal Auditor Travis Com to give you an overview of our audit issue follow-up. Travis.
Chair Palmisano, members of the committee, we continue to make progress in following up on prior and open audit issues. With the 2 new grant management issues, there are currently 24 open audit issues from the past couple of years that we are tracking. There's no overdue audit issues we are pleased to report. In addition, there's currently 18 of them where management has submitted the support, and we're in communication and working to validate that the audit issue and risk identified in the audit report has been successfully remediated, and we expect to close out those in the coming weeks and months as well. We have managed to close out 20 audit issues since the last committee, and that's where management submitted support, and we're able to validate and confirm success there. And there's 8 more open audit issues that are due by August 31st, 2019, just for kind of comparison, and we're going with there. And we would like to give a little bit more of a specific update on an audit that was presented last year on June 11, 2018. The Minneapolis audit. In a moment, I'd like to invite up Sandy Christensen, the Vice President of Finance Administration from Minneapolis, kind of speak a bit more. But with there, I'll just kind of just kind of some background. There are 4 identified issues from this audit report. The performance indicator review results with 7 sub-findings, and we were able to close out the last mid-March 2018. And then there's 3 other issues that were closed out in October 2018. Conflict of interest policy, contract required reporting element, and City of Minneapolis contract oversight. And now internal audit has been able to successfully we made all the issues from this audit report. And now I could turn over to Sandy Christensen.
Ms. Christensen, welcome. Thank you, Meet Minneapolis, for taking this audit so very seriously, and congratulations for closing all of these items.
As you know, I brought along Melvin Tennant, also to represent Meet Minneapolis. He's the president and CEO of Meet Minneapolis, and does a fabulous job directing the work of our organization.
Well, just Chair Palmisano, members of the Audit Committee, thank you for allowing us to be here today. Sandy will cover the slides in detail, but I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to come and demonstrate that we, as you pointed out, did take these issues very seriously, but I certainly don't want it to detract from the work that we do on behalf of the community, supporting the many jobs that we do, and continuing to help fill our convention center and supporting all of the mission of the city. So again, I just wanted to simply say thank you and look forward to great years ahead.
Thank you. Chair Palmisano and members of the committee, we are thankful for the opportunity to bring the final resolution of the audit of last year to you today. As you may recall, and it was alluded to by Mr. Kam, that the audit was the result of a year-long process. We had nearly 200 data items that were shared back and forth between Minneapolis and the internal audit department, and those findings were directed to 4 particular areas, as are indicated on this slide. 3 of those findings were closed in October of 2018 and were presented to this body. The remaining findings are related to the performance indicator items as noted on this particular slide. The remaining 4 sub-items that are submitted today were largely the result of unclear verbiage in our contract with the city as to how various items were to be reported. There was some confusion as to the data sources and what that data actually meant. And as we continue to work with the Minneapolis Convention Center on our contract that we'll be entering into beginning in 2020, we endeavor to ensure that all the required measures that are reflected in that contract are meaningful and measurable to ensure that that which we provide to you is useful for decision making and can be validated regularly. And with that, I'm happy to speak to any of the items on the list. They've been submitted to the Internal Audit Department and are available for your review.
Thank you. Are there any questions? There were a number of them last time. These do highlight the ones that were of concern, particularly the Part 3 third-party audit of the future leisure room nights calculations. So thank you very much. I appreciate Internal Audit's work in closing out all of these issues, and I appreciate your attention to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kam.
And then we'd just like to thank management from the Convention Center Meet Minneapolis for communicating and being able to close out these issues as well with their and just kind of some continuing off audit issue follow-up. The following non-public audit reports have one or more currently open issues. The People Software Portal Security IT Audit, Water Treatment and Distribution IT Audit, the Traffic Signal IT Audit, and the Police Information Management Security Audit. These are all relate to system security issues, and we continue to be working with management and with follow-up to ensure that they're successfully remediated and on time with those. And then the next 2 slides just kind of some detail of the other current open audit issues, kind of spanning a number of different audits and the kind of current due dates, noting the 2 new grant management issues. So there are a number with the payroll and payroll audit that are coming due in June that we continue to work on. And then this is just a list of the current ones that we are currently validating in progress that are in our queue right now. We have the support and working to successfully close out the audit. And then just kind of these next 2 slides, just state auditor findings updates. Really no update on this because until the new reports are issued, as it currently marks still in progress for those. And I could turn back over to Director Bingby.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kam. Our administrative updates, we have a couple of updates here. I think we said this back in February, but I'd like to say again, we have promoted our internal audit senior auditor, Yuget Esolot, to audit manager. She can't be with us today. And I would like to introduce Kamlan Alade, our new internal auditor. Kamlan?
Chair Parmesano, Audit community members, my name is Kamlan Alade, and I joined the Internal Audit Department last March from Finance Department. Before that, I worked in Convention Center for a year, and before that, I served in the U.S. Army active duty gas station in Hawaii. So I moved to Minnesota from there.
That's terrific. You seem very well suited to complement our auditing team. Welcome, and thank you, Kamlan, for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Parmesano.
Mr. Alade has come to us from the Finance Department, so we're happy to have his expertise on our team.
Great.
I would like to announce that Internal Auditor Travis Combe and Internal Audit Intern Danny Hunt have both graduated from university. Travis graduated from the University of Minnesota, and Danny has graduated from the University of St. Thomas.
Congratulations. Thanks. That's great.
We have one other project in progress. We have begun our internal audit professional peer review self-assessment. The City of Minneapolis Internal Audit has never had a peer review, and we would like to hopefully pass our first peer review next year. So the self-assessment will identify areas where we need to improve on policies and or procedures and get them in place so that we can pass our peer review next year. Our audit intern, Danny Hunt, has been instrumental in this heavy lift, so she is helping us start the self-assessment. And then finally, I have an appreciation award. Would Ms. Hunt come up, please? Danny Hunt, our audit intern, is leaving our internal audit department to take her full-time job upon graduation. So our audit department would like to thank her for her year of service with the City of Minneapolis Internal Audit. Ms. Hunt?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. We will miss you. You're regularly walking around the halls, curious about all the ways that City Hall works and what's going on. So.
Oh, yes. I am beyond words, and I can't express my gratitude enough, but I did just want to prepare a short statement. Madam Chair, Audit Committee members, I'd like to say thank you in all sincerity. My experience with the internal audit team has been invaluable in shaping my ethical and functional practices as an auditor. As a young woman entering the world of business, I consider it a great privilege to have had the opportunity to work with and learn from Director Bigby and our audit manager, Huguette Esso-Latte. These two inspirational leaders have not only helped me to develop my communication and critical thinking skills, but have challenged me to grow in ways I could not have imagined. I'm so grateful to have been a part of an organization which cares holistically for all of its members, no matter how underrepresented. I'm grateful to have been a part of a small but powerful audit team, as Chair Palmisano has said before, which has worked diligently to add value to our city and contribute to the common good. I'm sad to go, as I fear I will never find a position as satisfying, beneficial, and meaningful as being an auditor for the City of Minneapolis. But my promise to you is that I will bring the values and skills I've learned here with me in the community to the private sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations again.
I won't spend too much time on our training. This is just a list of training activities that we've engaged in for our continuing professional education requirements. Our next audit committee is August 19th, and that wraps it up for the auditor update.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments, Director, Mr. Fisher?
Director, sorry, Mr. Fisher. Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Bigby, I noticed in the materials that we have a new item added, the audit license plate reader, and I guess that's the only reference I had, so I wanted to ask,
yes,
what's that?
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members. I'm just going to scroll down right here. So committee member David Fisher is referring to our body-worn camera biennial compliance audit, while we also performed a license plate reader compliance audit in conjunction with the biennial body-worn camera audit. So I have added that to the planned audit because we issue 2 separate reports for those reviews. We are engaging with our IT auditor to perform those reviews with us this year, and we plan to kick them off in Q3 2019. So it's a separate regulation. It gets a separate report, but we do the work in conjunction with the body-worn camera audit.
Are you asking what is the device? Is that what you're-
Oh.
What is the, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I did not work on this review last year. I was not here when they did it, but it was 2 years ago. Sorry. It is an automated license plate reader. It's automated technology, and the state requires a biennial audit of the controls around the use of that technology.
Madam Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a reader that is within the body cam device, or is it a wholly separate corner standing type device?
It is similar in that it is a biennial audit requirement of surveillance technology, but the body-worn camera devices don't have anything to do with the automated license plate reader technology.
I don't see any other questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the auditor update, Chair Palmisano and audit committee members.
Super. I think that was a great update this year, or this month. I'd like to move to receive and file the update report and the report on her work in progress and all of the things that we just saw in this presentation. So moved. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next are announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? I didn't think so, but it's on our agenda just as part of the LIMS process. So seeing no further business on our agenda today, we are adjourned. Thank you for joining. Oh, wait, one announcement. We did that before you arrived. Yep. So with all business done, we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.